The Chinese president opening the 20th Communist Party Congress today, a week-long event which is expected to win a third leadership term and cement his place as the country's most powerful ruler. This is since Mao Zedong, the gathering of roughly 23 delegates. This is 2,300 delegates from around the country is being held at the vast Great Hall of the People on the west side of Tiananmen Square. Xi Jinping's address will give an assessment of the previous term, but also roadmap for what can we expect in the 5 years ahead, and will almost certainly be lengthy, with 2070s lasting 3.5 hours. This was his address in the highly choreographed, mostly closed-door conclave. This is the participants have already picked the members of the party, around 200-member Central Committee, which is the turn select, the 25-person. This is already done, but so this is, going to be just making it clear that he is coming back for his third term. One of the key questions will revolve around whether or not to maintain, the zero COVID strategy, which has been prevailing in China. The policy has strengthened social control over the Chinese citizens, whose every move is now computer registered in a country already criticized internationally for human rights violation. And we have, Dong Zhu joining us. Dong Zhu is the CGTN reporter. A very good morning to you. This is, get us details about, the Congress that's starting today. This is not a true election process, is it? The decision has already been made way before the Congress.
Well, actually, I am now standing inside the Great Hall of the People here in the capital city, Beijing, where the 20th National Congress of the Communist Party of China is being convened right at the moment. Well, this year, about some 2,200 delegates from the China's ruling Communist Party are joining this Congress, and they come from all walks of life, such as the village party secretaries or, social workers, and all others from other sectors, including the science and technology, national defense and law, as well as many others had made great contributions in their own industries, as well as to the country. And as the time we're speaking, actually, before the opening ceremony, there held a delegate corridor. It's actually a more organized press stakeout, a rare opportunity for the press to ask questions to each of the delegated representatives before the opening. So right now, they've already had the works laid out for them, because over the coming days there are 5 things will top the agenda. First, they will hear and examine the work report from the preceding 19th Central Committee, as well as examine the 19th Central Commission for discipline inspections. And third, they will elect the 20th CPC National Central Committee, as well as to adopt the amendment of the Constitution. And finally, they will also examine and deliberate and examine the 20th CPC Central Commission for discipline inspections. One of the agenda which has been closely watched here and also as well as abroad is the constitutional amendments. Well, actually, throughout the history, the party constitution has been amended for about 10 times. Because, according to the press conference yesterday, the revision will enshrine the theories and practices for the national governance, because the party constitution is the top binding document for the Communist Party in China, and that's why they will have the blueprint and the view for the national plans for the coming next 5 years, and also other issues like China's anti-corruption campaign, poverty alleviation, the relationship with the United States, as well as how China will contribute to the global governance, will also be closely watched during the session. Back to you.
Zhu, if you could tell us, Xi Jinping is expected to be named the party's general secretary following the Congress, but he won't be confirmed as a third term as yet. That's going to happen only in the annual meeting, which will take place in March.
Oh, well, as I mentioned, the constitutional amendment will be proceeded during the whole sections. I think, everybody, a lot of people here and abroad are close to watch how this very important document will be amended. So we will see in the coming days if we have a further, updated information.
Right, so this roughly week-long conclave that meets once every 5 years to appoint its new leaders, discuss changes as far as the party is concerned, the constitution is concerned. You spoke about, the delegates, 2,300 of them, only a quarter being women. What's the kind of role that women play in the politics as far as China is concerned?
Well, as I mentioned before, all these over 2,200 delegates, they come from all walks of life. They could, he or she could be the village party secretaries or social workers or someone who from the entrepreneurs or at least from the science and technology industry or someone from the sports industry. So I think they get to represent, the whole walks of life. So that's why I think it's a very representative in terms of how their occupations and everything.
Right. So what we're expecting today is 2,300 delegates there. The formal process will take place only in March, like you have mentioned. What all, can we expect during this week-long conclave?
Well, according to the press conference yesterday, they will lay out about 5 different press conferences throughout the sessions. Well, that include, party member delegates from the foreign ministry, from the environmental department, and also as well as from the discipline inspection department. So we will, as the time approaches, we will get more information at what they will deliver during the press conference about their views and their plans in the next 5 years.
Zio, one of the big questions being, will there be a change as far as the zero COVID policy is concerned after this Congress, after this conclave?
Well, that is a question I think a lot of people are concerned about. But as I mentioned before, we don't have anything by hand right now because the open ceremony has just kicked off. During the open ceremony, we are expected the senior leaders will deliver the work report. Maybe by the end of the open ceremony, we will have a clear picture of what China's strategy will be in the next 5 years.
Right. Thank you so much, Zhu, for joining us and getting us all those details. All eyes on that week-long conclave in China. We also have our guests joining us. We have Professor Anuradha Chinoy joining us, a former dean at the School of International Studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University and the professor at Jindal Global University. We also have with us Tan, this is Tangin, China's affairs experts on political and economic affairs commentator as well. Let me take my first question to Tangin. Mr. Tangin, Xi Jinping is expected to break with tradition and take on a third term, paving the way for a potential lifelong rule. What is his vision?
Well, I think he expressed it at this. Now, remember that there's 2 things at work here. One is the party, the second is the government. And right now, you have the party meeting. The difference is that China is a one-party state, so people pay very close attention. But with over 90 million members, it's not exactly unified. They practice discipline. If after discussion, and it is discussion, people think that it's somebody's just making orders and everyone's following, and that's not at all the case. I've been in many, many meetings where they talk at great length from very different vantage points. So at this juncture, continuity, especially during times that Xi Jinping described as grave in terms of domestic issues and drastic in terms of international issues. These are times when they really do feel that they need to keep the existing team in place, that this is halfway across the river and you do not want to be changing horses or riders at this point. But the next issue is going to be how do you prepare for the future? The party has identified a lot of goals going forward, 2049, and obviously that's going to require new leadership. So people will be looking.
What kind of challenges do you think, the kind of challenges he'd be facing?
Well, right now, I mean, there's a lot of questions about the economy. You know, real estate is not doing well. The global economy is really having problems. China had some upbeat news. Their inflation is much lower than most places in the world. It came at 2.7%, but producer price index is going down. So there looks like there might have been a peak or something like that. But, you know, globally, we all know the situation is, in fact, very, very concerning, very drastic. You have conflicts going on. So that's the short term. You know, energy and food. How do you deal with the debts of these developing countries? You know, all of these organizations, including the SCO, which India is part of, the RCEP, these economic groupings. China is struggling to deal with what they see as a very hostile environment, especially from the U.S., you know, saying you can't have any chip-making machines, we're not going to sell you any chips, you're somehow a security risk after all these years of close cooperation where U.S. companies have made a lot of money. So also COVID, people are very anxious about it. They obviously would like to see it go, but this is not a political decision. I mean, people keep talking about this as if you can wave your magic wand and just say it's over. Well, it isn't over. 3% of the people who've gotten COVID have had this long COVID, which means that, you know, we don't know enough about it, that they're in many cases incapacitated. U.S., they estimate 500,000 people have been moved from the productive side to, you know, basically depending on others. This can have long-term consequences. Obviously, it's affecting the unemployment situation or perception of it in the United States. You have 17 million people in Europe who have had long COVID. So this is a scientific issue. It has to be addressed that way. China is very proud of its record. They've had very few deaths. And they
right. So exactly, it's zero COVID policy that we're talking about, you know, where it, you know, advocated short-term pain in exchange for long-term gains. And that's how China has, you know, kept its zero COVID policy in place. Do you think that's led to less number of deaths and hospitalization in comparison to, say, the West, particularly in the United States?
Well, I don't think there's any question about it. The statistics are there. I mean, the U.S. has had over 1 million deaths, and it's going up by, you know, 300 or 400 each day. I mean, this is not a situation where it's over. You can stop caring about it, you can stop counting, but that doesn't mean that people aren't dying, that they're not catching it, that they're not having long COVID. So yes, China does look at its record. They tend to see things, as Xi said in his speech, people-oriented policies. As opposed to thinking that economic policies will solve people's problems. They say, look, put the people first, use economics to, as necessary to improve their lot. But, you know, don't look at people as numbers. Look at people as individuals, as family members, you know, parents, etc.
Right, prevention is better than cure, but at what economic cost? We also have Anuradha Chinoy joining us. Anuradha Chinoy, how does his third term of Xi Jinping impact the West, or India in particular?
Well, as far as the West is concerned, I think in all Western documents, they see China as the most difficult and major competitor and brinking on confrontation. They keep repeating that it's a big threat, and therefore the U.S. policy, for example, is of military containment to some extent, and you could see in Pelosi's visit to Taiwan, and their act on the chips, where they don't want to give sensitive technologies to China, so they will try add tariffs, raising their tariffs on Chinese goods. So, and China is very well aware of it. So China will have to counter this, and this will come out in their policy documents. They'll put in a lot more into R&D, into upping their artificial intelligence and chip making, etc., so that it does not impact them. They will look much more to the south, to Russia, to you know, so that their balance of trade doesn't get affected, because they are very clear that the West is going to try and isolate them to some extent.
Right. I would like to take this up with Mr. Tangin. Particularly, like Ms. Chinoy mentioned, Russia. So what about China's relationship with Russia? That is also being, looked at very, very closely when we talk about how the situation is, especially when we talk about, that looming recession also coming about. Will that also be impacting China?
Well, yes, definitely it'll impact China. I mean, China's a huge trading nation. They're the #1 trading partner of over 100 countries around the world. And in terms of Russia, it's very complex because on one hand, China, anyone who says that China is happy about what happened in Ukraine obviously doesn't know very much. Ukraine was a central part of the Belt and Road Initiative, and now it's basically been cut off. And it was also an alternate route, not going through Russia, that was going to Europe. So, there's been a tremendous amount of money spent on that. So also, the Chinese have a very firm policy of non-interference in the affairs of other countries. So this always runs counter it. But on the other side, they see the U.S. and NATO provoking Russia into this situation. I mean, every single major foreign policy expert in the U.S. says, don't go into Ukraine, it means war. And yet they went into Ukraine. So from China's perspective, they see that they may need Russia's support if, in fact, the U.S. desire is to provoke China in using Taiwan, which appears to be the case with these enhanced gun sales, the sailing of warships up and down the Taiwan Straits, increased pressure economically, politically, and militarily. It's just not heading in a very good direction. So obviously, they want to keep Russia on their side, but they, as you'll note, they are not selling arms to Russia, and they're not giving any support other than saying, look, this has to be settled at the diplomacy table as opposed to the battlefield.
Right. So we have spoken about how the equation between Russia and China impacts the West, particularly the United States. Let me take my next question to Mr. Chinoy. Let's talk about how how the role as far as China is concerned. How has that changed under the leadership of Xi Jinping, who many believe is a dictator?
You mean China's role or China-Russia role?
How has the situation in China changed under his leadership?
Well, from all reports, China is increasingly, there's a lot of surveillance on people, but at the same time, there's also debate and discussion. If you see the Chinese press, there are a lot of, even on Ukraine, there has been a lot of discussion amongst people on their bloggers, in their social net community. And China has also moved economically very ahead. They have made a lot of gains in these last 10 years under Xi Jinping. They appear much stronger, tougher. Internationally, he has spoken about, he's given his vision for the international community, talked about common global development, a common global security, so he says China is ready to play its role in the international system. So there is a kind of Chinese nationalism and power which has been projected under Xi Jinping, and I think that is what will also continue. It will be endorsed in this Congress.
Right. Thank you so much for joining us this morning with all those details. Mr. Tangin and Ms. Chinoy joining us this morning.